Namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 8. Text 10, then 11, and 12. So what is described here is the period before this present manifestation, which is called the night of Brahma. The time span of this cosmos is divided into days and nights of very great lengths of time. So, in the day, as we're experiencing at present, the living entities have bodies and are acting under the influence of their karma. The living entities are given these bodies in the beginning of the day by Brahma. They get these bodies according to whatever remnant of karma they have from the day before. So then they act, they begin their activities at the start of this day and receive new and new bodies according to the law of karma. So this day goes on for 4,300,000,000 solar years. And then comes the night, when the planets up to the Brahma Loka are inundated in this water described in the verses here, the water of devastation, Garbhodak ocean. So at this time the living entities in their subtle bodies float or are merged within that water. And then gradually these living entities are agitated by kala shakti, the time factor. And thus their desires for activity are aroused. So At that time, as we've just heard, the Lord sees his own body as bluish. Mm-hmm. And thereafter, the lotus will again grow from his navel and open. And Brahma will appear there and again give these living entities material bodies so that they can act out their desires which have been agitated by the time factor. So, time, as we've just heard, is also called avidya. Avidya means ignorance. So, karma, or material activity, is only possible by the time factor. Because time is the energy that makes everything work in this world. Mm-hmm. Just like the machinery inside of a watch or a clock. It must be powered by something. Mm-hmm. So if it's one of these old spring clocks with a key, then you wind it up and the spring becoming tense is the source of power that turns the whole machinery. Or modern clocks, they have an electric motor. But the point is here that when there is power, when there is energy, then all of this intricate machinery inside of a watch moves, it all turns, and in this way one can see, one can understand the passage of time. Now, a clock is simply is human beings' way of simplifying the movements he sees in heaven. The sun passes through the sky every day in about 12 hours' time. And that is why on any clock you see, it is numbered from 1 to 12. Why that particular number 12? Because the ancient sages, they divided the course of the sun into 12 parts. And similarly, the moon shows us the course of time in the night. The moon also comes across the sky. And the seasons, the months and the years, their passage can be seen by the turning of all the stars in heaven. So this whole universe is nothing but a great clock. So what is the power behind that clock? There is no gigantic spring anywhere, nor is there a great battery. But actually it is kala shakti itself, the time energy itself, which is powering the movements of the cosmos. So, kala, time, makes all activity in this universe possible. Including the appearance and movement and disappearance of these bodies that we have now. And time is called avidya, which means ignorance. So that means that all of these activities taking place in this universe are taking place within ignorance. So it is this kala shakti, this time energy, avidya shakti, the energy of ignorance, which separates us from God. Just as in this very amazing, transcendental picture that we've just been presented with in these verses of Lord Garbhodakashai Vishnu lying on the water of devastation. He's lying upon the Ananta Shesh couch, this gigantic snake form of the Lord with thousands and thousands of heads. So Vishnu is lying upon this snake couch within the waters of devastation in the lower regions of the universe. So during the night, which is described here, the living entities are also merged within that ocean. So they're all together with the Lord. But they are covered by avidya, by ignorance. So although the Lord is their maintainer within those waters of devastation, they do not understand. Actually, that ignorance is synonymous. You know that word? Synonymous? Okay. that avidya or ignorance is synonymous with selfishness. Those living entities do not look towards the Lord as their maintainer, as their shelter, as their goal. Because they're selfish. They're simply looking at their own desires, which are manifested in the subtle bodies. All those living entities are floating within that ocean in subtle bodies, and within those subtle bodies are subtle desires, and this is all those living entities know. And because of that selfishness, thus they are subject to time. That means they're subject to be born, to exist for some time, and to gradually dwindle away and die, body after body after body. They're subject to this day and night of the cosmos. And finally, they're subject to the total devastation of the cosmos. When everything merges within the body of Mahavishnu. And later it comes out again. And again there are these days and nights of Brahma. So, in this way, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, that Mamaivang Sajiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, these living entities are Krishna's own parts and parcels. But Manakshashtanindriyani prakriti stani karshati. Due to ignorance of their eternal relationship with the Lord, they are simply struggling under the control of time with the mind and the senses. Prakriti stani karshati. In this way, the entire material existence is being maintained. This material world is called Prakritistan. Just like you've probably heard, there is Hindustan, there is Pakistan. Stan means place. So there's a country called Hindustan, the place of the Hindus, and Pakistan, the place of the Muslims. So this Mahatattva, the place where all the universes appear and disappear in time. This is the Prakritistan. This is the place of material nature. And the answer to the question, why is there a material world? Why did God make it so? The answer to the question is, as long as there are living entities in ignorance, and again, remember, ignorance means simply selfishness, there will always be a prakriti sthana. So this prakriti sthana is known as the relative world. And the spiritual realm, Krishna Loka, Vaikuntha Loka, is known as the absolute world. These two terms, relative and absolute, are opposites. Now, the meaning of these two words and why they're in opposition is actually very simple to understand. The relative world is the world of time. You see? Time, the time factor is all pervading here. Srila Prabhupada says the time is the factor of relativity. In other words, the time is the factor which relates one material thing to another all throughout this universe and all universes. It's time that primarily creates all the distinctions that we perceive here, which are called in Sanskrit vishesha, all the particular differences that are manifest in this world. This is all the result of time. Because primordial, you know that word? Primordial? Primordial matter is just a lump. It's just an indistinguishable mass, which is called pradhan. But when matter is agitated by time, then from out of this ignorant lump appears, first of all, the three modes of material nature. And from these three modes, just like the three primary colors, yellow, blue, red, you get all colors. So out of these three modes of nature, you get all variety. And all of this variety is primarily understood in terms of time, the relationship between the different features of this world are primarily understood through time. I'll give an example. What is the main difference between this room and the room upstairs where I stay? Now, someone may say, well, this room looks different than that room. That's the main difference. But you can make that room look just like this room. We could just build another temple upstairs. Looks in every way just like that one. Mm-hmm. So, but how am I sure that this room is different from the one upstairs where I was before? Because it took me time to move from there to here. Mm-hmm. In the theory of Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity, he speaks of space-time, that space or distance between any two things, that is time. And that's how you know two things are different. Because there is space or time which separates them. Mm-hmm. So, this is the fundamental principle of what is known as the relative world. I know that Sofia is a different city from Bucharest and from Athens. I know that they're not the same city. Why? Because it takes me hours to drive from Bucharest to Sofia, and it takes hours more to drive from Sofia to Athens. Mm-hmm. That's the main difference. Not so much the way the cities look. For instance, in some cities, some big cities in the West, there's a section, like there's a section of New York, there's a section of London, different cities. There's a section called Chinatown, which is where all the Chinese live. And on these streets of Chinatown, you will see everything in Chinese. There's Chinese Buddhist temples, there's Chinese restaurants, there's Chinese shops. All the signs are in Chinese letters. All the people are Chinese. People, they're only talking Chinese. But that doesn't mean that China is a part of New York City. because it takes it takes a long time to go from New York to China, to Peking, to Shanghai. This is how we know there's a difference. So, now what about the absolute world? Yeah, the absolute world is the world of timelessness. So, in the absolute world, there are also distinctions, unlimited distinctions, infinitely more distinctions, qualities, differences than here in the material world. Some people think that no, in the absolute world, if it's absolute, there can be no distinctions. It must just all be light or, impersonal. But that's not the fact. That's not the distinguishing feature of the absolute world. The absolute world is full of infinite distinctions and qualities. But the absolute world is called absolute because time does not separate these qualities from one another. There is, for instance, there is a difference between Krishna's different pastimes in the spiritual world. But the difference is not established by time. The difference is established by the mood of love. But there is no time factor separating them. When a devotee, as soon as a devotee meditates in pure Krishna consciousness upon a particular pastime of Krishna, he's there. By Krishna's grace, he experiences that pastime. Or we'll give an example from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita by Sanatana Goswami. There was a devotee who, by chanting the holy name, had entered the spiritual Dwarka, which is the topmost region of Vaikuntha Loka, just before Vrindavan, Dwarka Dham. So by our conception, the spiritual Dwarka is very, very, very far away from here. we would think that one has to travel a great distance, must take a long time. This devotee, whose name was Gop Kumar, he did not feel fully happy in Dwarka, so he asked Narada Muni, and Narada Muni told him, that's because you belong in Vrindavan, Vrindavan Dham. So he asked, how do I go there? Narada Muni said, well, you can't enter the spiritual Vrindavan from here. You have to go to the earthly Vrindavan, Bhauma Vrindavan. And so Gop Kumar, he was wondering, well, how will I go there from here? It's so far away. And Narada Muni said, just close your eyes. So he closed his eyes, and then he heard Narada Muni say, now open them. And he was in Vrindavan on this earth. And by chanting the holy name there, he entered Krishna's pastimes. It doesn't say that he left the earthly Vrindavan and went somewhere else. It says there, he just became conscious of Krishna's eternal Leela. So this is the meaning of absolute. In the absolute world, everything is connected by consciousness. Different moods of loving devotion to the Lord. So one can move from one feature of the absolute world to another without any time at all. Or one even can experience many, many different features of the spiritual world all at once. So that Leela Shakti, the Leela Shakti, see, there's this Kala Shakti, which is the time energy, and there's the Leela Shakti, the energy of Krishna's pastimes, which is transcendental, absolute. That Leela Shakti manifests here in the material world when Krishna appears here in his avatar form. And that Leela Shakti appears within this universe like the sun, dispelling all darkness of illusion. And thus it becomes possible to know the absolute nature here. Just like when Draupadi was being insulted in the assembly of the Kurus, the Kuru dynasty. her husbands, the Pandavas, had lost everything in a gambling match, a cheating gambling match. The envious Duryodhana had conspired with his uncle Shakuni, who is an expert cheat. And they had challenged Yudhisthira to a match of dice. And Yudhisthira, being a Kshatriya, he could not refuse their challenge. And thus, the Pandavas, who had gained a beautiful kingdom and actually had already performed the Rajasuya sacrifice, declaring Yudhisthira to be the emperor of the whole world, they lost everything. Including their wife Draupadi, who is none other than the goddess of fortune. Draupadi is so beautiful that she also has the name Krishna, just like Krishna, Lord Krishna himself. So Draupadi shares this name. She's also called Krishna. Just the end, the last A is long, so it's held a little on Krishna. But this is the name of Draupadi. So she was dragged in front of the assembly of Kurus, and she was told by these evil persons like Duryodhana and Karna that now she's a slave. Now she no longer belongs to the Pandavas, but she belongs to the Kauravas, and they're going to do with her as they like. So these evil men, they plan to insult Draupadi in the worst possible way. By pulling off all of her clothes. So Dushashan, who was the brother of Duryodhana, he began to pull on Draupadi's sari to rip it off of her body. But these rascals did not calculate upon the Leela Shakti of the Lord. That Draupadi is a personal, eternal associate of Lord Krishna. And her activities in this world, like Krishna's, are all part of Leela, the Lord's pastime. So she raised her hands and she cried out, "My dear Lord, I have no other shelter than you. Please save me." So then that sari, which appeared, that cloth, which appeared to be ordinary, relative piece of cloth, that means it only occupies so much space, and that means only in a very short time it can be pulled off. Suddenly, that cloth became absolute. Dushyasan pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled, and there was a big pile of cloth that he made. But Draupadi's sari always remained intact upon her body. It could never be removed. So finally, Dushyasan he was totally exhausted from pulling. He couldn't pull anymore. So in this wonderful pastime of Draupadi, we see the qualification for entering the absolute realm, and that is full surrender. Humility before the Lord, full dependence upon the Lord's protection. So the price to enter the absolute world of the Lila Shakti is dependence, a feeling of utter dependence upon the Lord. And the opposite mood, independence, qualifies one to be gripped by the kala shakti, the time factor. Mm-hmm. Again, this is selfishness. Mm-hmm. What this means in essence is that the living entity does not admit himself to be the servant of Krishna, but rather thinks he is God himself. There was a disciple of a big Mayavadi guru. And one day, he suddenly had some insight into the teachings he'd been hearing all those years. And he understood himself in a flash to be God. So then he went to his guru and said goodbye. This is the process in the Mayavadi Sampradaya. When you realize you're God, then you can say goodbye to your guru. You don't need him anymore. So then this new God, he began to walk through the marketplace. Which was filled with people. And then he heard a shout from up ahead, "Make way for the elephant! The elephant is coming! Everyone stand back!" And so he saw all the people moving, clearing a path for a great elephant. which was coming along, and there was a rider on the top of the elephant, and he was the one who was shouting, "Make way for the elephant, make way for the elephant." So the new god thought, why should I stand aside? Because I'm God now. Rather, this elephant should stand aside for me. He's just an ignorant animal, but I am the all-pervading absolute truth. So this new god, he kept walking without going either side. And he came face to face with the elephant. And the elephant simply swept him out of his path with his big nose. So this new god went flying into a vegetable stand, knocking everything over. And he landed with such force that he broke his arm and leg. So the next day, the new god returned to his guru, now with one arm in a sling and walking on a crutch. And he said to his spiritual master, I have a great doubt now in the philosophy that you taught me. I was sure that I understood yesterday that I was God. Which is what you've been instructing me for many years. But yesterday, in the marketplace, when there was a shout, make way for the elephant, I did not make way, because I was sure I was God. And this is what happened to me. And his guru said, didn't you hear God on top of the elephant? When God on top of the elephant tells God in the street to move aside, he should move aside. So, this story, of course, is a good illustration of the absurdity of Mayavadi philosophy. But also what is very instructive in this story is that the elephant represents the time factor. As soon as someone thinks, I am God, I am supreme, I am absolute, then the time factor comes to him like a big elephant. Actually, this time factor is Krishna's mercy, because by the blows of time, the living entity gradually understands, like this person, maybe I'm not God. Of course, then also the story shows he went back to his guru, and his guru gave some new version of the same nonsense philosophy. So that is always going on in the world of Maya. Punak punak charvata charvananam. The living entities are always chewing the chewed. The same old nonsense is always being served up again, reheated. It's the same old Sunday feast preparation from 3 million years ago. Just heat it up again one more time. Now eat this. This is new. Yes, you are God. You are God. No, believe it. It's true. And then the time factor again smashes us again and again. So one who is intelligent will give up eating this punak, this chewing the chewed, what others have chewed, the same old nonsense philosophy, and become humble and surrender to Krishna. Are there any questions? Yes.
Първият технически в началото се спомена Соларик и аз. Дали ти преведе светлини за това поприке, защото за продължителността на живота в какви слънчеви да се защото светлините се разстояние. И второ, в една лекция много време през 10 години стана дума, че читание казва една кала. Нещо във връзка с това. Когато питах за продължителността на един кръг, който стана една кала. Второто, то нещо повече в тази тема, когато читае, казва накала.
Solar years means that the sun moves through a cycle in 365 days, and that's known as a year. One solar year.
Не е светлина, както ти го каза, си го слънче. Защото ще ги превеждам после тия неща, да си го. Because translation is with other meaning.
I see. Again, this Maya.
No. In this case, no.
Oh, it's Yoga Maya. I see.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Oh, did he?
About за продължителността на кръга. Колко минути?
No. The duration of... Oh, yes, right. Yes. There's no hard and fast rule. So, nakala means you can chant at any time. It's not just... Actually, we should chant all the time. It's not that there's some time that's right and some time that's wrong to chant Hare Krishna, as it is, for instance, with other Vedic mantras. Yes. It's not manifested unless you're completely Krishna conscious. When one is not Krishna conscious, then the spiritual identity is in the form of a seed only, this spark, the Jiva Atma. Mm-hmm. But as you know, of any seed, the form is there in potential. But it's not manifest. So that seed must be planted within the internal potency. Again, this is this Lila Shakti, Yogamaya potency. And the seed must be watered by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then the eternal form of the soul will manifest. And when love of Krishna is fully awakened, then that form, that spiritual form, fully manifests and begins its eternal activities of service to the Lord. No, even at that time, even the subtle bodies are dissolved. There are the 5 gross elements and 3 subtle elements, and all these elements dissolve. But one thing remains, and that is avidya. So those living entities are merged into the body of Mahavishnu, but within his, what is called Achit Shakti. Achit Shakti means the Shakti of unconsciousness, Achit. So they are enveloped in total unconsciousness, although they are within the body of Mahavishnu and not covered by subtle elements, and certainly not gross elements. Yes, Aprame. Yeah, but that's distance for those who are conditioned by time and space. If you love Krishna, then you will always be in Vrindavan. Even if your body is in Sofia. Yes. Oh, okay. No, from the attitude, as I said, a devotee is one who is always dependent upon Krishna. And a demon is one, as Prabhupada said, demon means puffed up. Demon is one who thinks he's independent, self-sufficient, can do what he likes. Well, that's the Mayavadi philosophy. There are two basic explanations of the Vedic knowledge which we follow here in this movement of Krishna consciousness. The one explanation is, as you're hearing in this class, that Krishna is God and the living entities are Krishna's eternal servants. This is Krishna's own explanation. But there's another explanation which comes from great sages, like Shankaracharya is the most recently famous, but even before him there were other great sages like Dattatreya who taught the same philosophy, that the living entity himself is God. And we are just now in some illusion, thinking we are not God. Actually, the Vaishnava explanation is the opposite. That we are in illusion thinking we are God. Actually, the living entities now, they do think that they're God. So this Mayavadi philosophy is just another, it's just a very fine form of materialism. The fineness is just in that they say you can only realize that you're God when you break down all name, form, quality, activity, when you nullify all the distinctive features of this world, and you're left with nothing else but the self, which is impersonal. And that self, that impersonal self, which has no name, no form, no quality, no activity, that is God, and that is you. But that's not much of a God. A God who just is, but does nothing, because he cannot do anything. But that philosophy, Mayavadi philosophy, is, although it is absurd, it is very widespread. There are many, many people around the world who have this idea of the supreme truth. Often this idea is, of course, being imported to these Western European countries from India by some guru, some Sri Mata guru, or whoever it may be. But also the Europeans themselves, different philosophers, thinkers, have also come to the same conclusion by their own speculations. So this is what we call Mayavadi philosophy. Yes. This is the statement of Lord Vishnu, not exactly Lord Krishna himself. Lord Vishnu he's called Narayana. Narayana means Nara Ayana. He is the shelter of all the Naras. The Naras means the beings, the living beings. As we were describing, they all enter into his body after the universe is destroyed and take shelter there. So they're merged in his body. So in one sense, they're one with him. And there they remain in the state called susupti, total unconsciousness, for a long, long, long time. Until Lord Narayan, Mahavishnu, begins to think about their welfare, that they should have the chance to become God conscious, Krishna conscious, and be delivered from this ignorance. So then that's where this statement comes from, that now I am one, let me become many, let me release these living entities who are one with me. Let me release them in the next cosmic manifestation. Because when they're conscious, we mean at least materially conscious, then in that state they have the opportunity to revive their God consciousness by association with saintly persons, by learning from saintly persons the Vedic knowledge. As long as they're merged in unconsciousness, in this state of oneness with the Lord, there's no chance. That is why the Lord desires to become many. Krishna is so wonderful that even though he becomes many, he still remains one. Prabhupada says this is transcendental mathematics. That 1 minus 1, in other words, Mahavishnu, he expands his potency, his energy, and all these living entities who are one with him come out. So 1 minus 1 is still 1. Still, Mahavishnu remains as God, as the shelter of all potencies. Yes, Panduran.
Service, which is a half an hour a day or 1 hour a day, how can we become fully dependent on Krishna? Shall we become not acting
Idle. Yeah.
Or shall we act, because I heard that one should never stay idle, because
Well, in this movement, you don't have to artificially create service. There already is so much service. One just has to have the eyes to see it. Just like when I said I came here, and upon arriving, I saw garbage all over the lawn, which no one else could see, apparently. So if one has the eyes for devotional service, there is too much devotional service. But when we're floating within our subtle bodies and seeing only our own desires, then service is difficult for us to understand. Адва.
Explain how the world looked like before, looked like 5,000 years ago. It was explanation India, soldiers and
big mountains.
Well, the world looked as it is described in the Vedic scripture. Why you need another description? Srila Prabhupada said that concerning these questions about, like in the Krishna book, how many soldiers were there in the Yadu dynasty and so on and so forth, that this is all the manifestation of Krishna's spiritual opulence. So when Krishna appears in this world, as I said, his Leela Shakti manifests. And that Leela Shakti is a Shakti of unlimited yet absolute opulence and variety.
Просто проявление на духовното великолепие и богатство на Кришна. Също така казах, когато Кришна идва и на неговото Лила Шакти, тя проявява това безкрайно разнообразие на абсолютния свят.
So there's no other way to understand these things. You know, how is there another way to understand why Draupadi's sari was ever longer, ever longer? I remember once someone was asking me, well, in these four-armed forms, or, you know, even more, sometimes there's 8-armed forms, how exactly are the arms connected with the body? Is there a big shoulder or so many arms? Or you cannot understand this in that way.
Как са свързани всички ръце? Има голямо рамо, което не може да разберем тези неща по този начин.
All right, we'll stop here. It's 9:30. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.